we're thrilled to actually begin the day by bringing in King County Executive Dow Constantine. The executive is well regarded as one of, if not the leader in terms of elected officials in the United States that has a deep appreciation and understanding for the power of music, not only on a human level as an individual, but also in terms of what music means for the broader economy, for the quality of life, for the health of his citizens. And he's joining us at the beginning. Dow, do we have you there?
Well, I feel like I'm here. Am I?
From the bunker? Yeah, no,
yes.
Yeah, great. So
exactly.
Thank you so much for joining us. And we're thrilled, obviously, to have you. We have a lot of attendees from all across the world. And why don't we just start big picture in terms of, could you just talk a little bit about what King County, not what King County is, but what the King County Executive does, and how out in the Pacific Northwest you relate to Seattle and how those connections work?
Okay, so I'm essentially the mayor of this county, and Martin Luther King County is about the 13th largest of the 3,200 or so counties in the U.S. We have about 2.3 million people living here. We have 39 cities, some of which you've heard of, like Seattle, which is about a third of the county. And we are responsible, the county government, for all the regional services, transit, the justice system for the most part, relevant to today, public health and human services. And so I've been spending a lot of my time running the public health response to this crisis. And as it happens, we were the first place to have a major outbreak of coronavirus in the United States. So we've been plenty busy the last couple of months or so.
Yeah.
And then King County and the city of Seattle and some of our smaller cities also directly support arts, music, and all the economic implications like tourism and arts employment that make our region a great place to live and to visit.
And I think, Dow, one of the things that's interesting about your background is, I've been fortunate to interview elected officials for 25 years, and every elected official, wants to kind of brag about how they're connected to music. And sometimes that's really meaningful. And sometimes it's like, I went to a concert when I was a sophomore in high school. But you come into public service, really with a strong music background and a community radio background. And could you speak a little bit about just sort of like your relationship to music and how that has sort of informed you as a public servant as you've moved on this path?
Yeah, well, first off, I'm very firmly in the fan category as opposed to the musician or recovering musician category. We're all musical. My dad's a visual artist, actually. And so I come to all this quite honestly, and I'm very keenly aware of the power of the arts to unite us and to transform the way we think about ourselves and our culture. With regard to music, though, I was always a big music fan, and then I got to college back kind of in the punk rock day and in the heyday of college radio, and wandered down and volunteered at University of Washington's college radio station, which was called KCMU, which has become KEXP, pretty well-known global station. And there I got to spin records for several years and help promote shows and be really immersed in it. It was a central experience of my college years for sure. Also met my wife there, who was the music director, worked at CBS Sony, and was infinitely cooler than I was. And bizarrely, she said yes. So we now have a young daughter who's being brought up on music. And it has been throughout our, 40 almost years together, central to our lives. And being so fortunate to live in a community that's had such a vibrant music scene has really, I think, been a defining factor in our lives together.
And I think that's so interesting because a lot of the kind of complications of this year for Music Cities Together and our partners and allies is that, we've recognized that many of our communities are already in a very complicated situation before the crisis, in terms of the sustainability of our cultural institutions and in terms of the ability for artists to make a living and live in urban centers. And this all is work that I know that you've engaged with for a long time. And obviously, Ray and Kate Becker on your team has been a big part of that. Could you speak a little bit about, things that you already were thinking about, kind of had in the hopper last year that you're looking to kind of implement as we moved into this, before we speak about what you're doing immediately now with the crisis?
Well, it will come as a surprise to no one in this meeting that arts, music, heritage is a major economic force, a major economic driver, a major employer in our region. The state of Washington, 5 or more years ago, there was $2 billion in economic activity in the sector. And we had something nearly $1 billion in payroll off of that activity, some 30,000 jobs. And I would hasten to add $87 million in taxes. I have watched personally the way in which the music scene here has risen and fallen with some of the broader social conditions. One of the biggest challenges we've had in recent years is the runaway real estate market and the way in which musicians, artists, performance spaces, galleries, venues have been driven out by gentrification. And one of the things that it takes to have a vibrant scene is space for people to create and to offer their art to others. And that was being squeezed out of our region. So Kate and I have been busy trying to construct ways that we, from the county government perspective, can help combat that, can provide some stability and longevity for venues and also artist housing and creative space. And then suddenly this happened. And this is an entirely different challenge, which is simply compounding all those woes. I'm really excited that you are gathering together to talk about the way through this, the way to, in the short term, preserve the venues and to help the workers, whether they're on stage or behind the scenes, get through it. And the way, over the longer term, that we can rebuild the kind of infrastructure that's going to allow us to have a vibrant, creative community in the future, because that is what defines quality of life here, just as much as the natural environment in our region. The arts, heritage, culture make this a worthwhile place to live and bring all those smart people from around the world who, ironically, are causing that run up in real estate values.
Right. No, and I think that's so important, and that's why, again, when, Music Policy Forum co-founder Ashley Keaton wanted to put together a delegation of elected officials and city staff from New Orleans, Seattle is where she took them, to get an understanding of, how does Seattle and King County think about ecosystems and think about interconnectedness, think about how do you try to row together, with the understanding, of course, that the structures of the music community, that were in place in January and February this year were really not sustainable or not at the level they need to be.
Yeah.
And so it's, I think one of the challenges we all face is sort of, recognizing and, kind of lifting up models that were as good as they could have been or working as well as they could have been, while also knowing that we need to do better before the shutdown. And then, of course, we get the shutdown. And a couple, questions about that. One piece, and again, we've had the enormous benefit of Kate Becker and her leadership, for our entire community. But one thing Kate has talked about in the King County context was the way that you and your team have been able to elevate the public health leadership to say, those are the scientists, those are the experts. We're going to be really listening to them and then trying to synthesize out what that means in terms of policy. Could you speak to that dynamic a little bit? Because most cities don't really have that, I feel like.
Yeah, so I found out, I was on the East Coast and got the call on Friday, the 28th of February, that we suddenly had this outbreak in a nursing home in Kirkland, which is across the lake from Seattle. And I flew back the next morning. We had a press conference and we put our public health officer in front to explain to the people in medical and scientific public health terms what this meant and what was going on. And we continued with that arrangement where we really wanted the scientists to be out front throughout this entire thing. One, because they're the ones who know what they're talking about, but two, people will listen to a doctor, a scientist, when they won't necessarily listen to a politician, and we needed people to listen, and we needed people to act based on what they were hearing. And they did act. And even before we had any mandatory restrictions, we simply asked, we told people what was going on, and we asked them please work from home. Please avoid being around those who are most vulnerable. Please wash your hands and do all the things you keep hearing. And people stayed home by the hundreds of thousands well before we had any mandatory orders in place. And that, I think, is what really spelled the difference here. And that has something to do with the community in which we live. It is quite, despite the image of these global corporations that live here, it's very communitarian. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of smart, thoughtful people who took this seriously and acted on it. And so we drove down that curve quite early. Now, of course, along with the rest of the world, the battle is to figure out how we can get out of duck and cover mode and into doing something else, but doing it safely. And obviously this conversation is but one part of all of that. But we continue to lead with science, and that is going to be our salvation. And I think that's what this nation and this world needs to do as well. That's
awesome. And I want to turn quickly to one last topic. One of the obviously, one of the hugest challenges facing the independent music community is the sustainability of our local grassroots independent venues. We're thrilled again that Mark David from Music Venue Trust is joining us. I'll talk some updates about the work they've been doing overseas. But one of the major sort of bright spot is really not the right word, but one of the developments that has been very encouraging for a lot of music activists is the creation out of nowhere of the National Independent Venue Alliance. And I know that in the King County, Seattle region, your venues have been working very hard to organize and mobilize. And I know that you are one of, maybe the only county, I'm not sure if there's another, that is actively in the process of trying to put money, direct county money, resources into supporting local venues. Could you speak a little bit about what that package is and where that stands and kind of what the venue conversation looks like in King County? So like Congress, we've had a succession of COVID-related budget bills, right? And I've put forward several proposals to the county council. And the most recent one we put forward it includes $4 million, $2 million that is going to arts and cultural organizations, and that's through our nonprofit For Culture, which is chartered by the county. The other $2 million through my office and the work of Kate Becker, who is an amazing human being, is to help venues, scientific organizations, and arts education, higher education. And what we're trying to do is make sure that the venues and people work with venues can get through this immediate period and be able to reopen their doors, recognizing there are going to be additional challenges in the future. The $2 million we've put in is a down payment. The $2 million is going to be matched with private and philanthropic money. The $2 million is going to give us the model we can use to build with other public money. It is a declaration that arts, heritage, culture, venues are a central and essential part of who we are as a community and as an economy, and that we need to fight to preserve them just as we need to fight to help other kinds of businesses and economic activity in our community. That's awesome. Congratulations, and we're rooting for you, and we appreciate everything that you guys are doing. I'm going to ask Alex if you could put a couple resources in the chat. I know there's a fantastic resource guide, which I believe is at kingcountycreative.com, but Alex, get the right link on that. I'll also point out that on the front page of Dow's website at dowconstantine.com is a fantastic interview about his relationship with music, and I will give him credit for choosing the best replacement song as his favorite replacement song, which of course is Left of the Dial. Left of the Dial. Also, Save the Showbox. There we go. Our most sacred local music venue from the old days. It's threatened. You want to save it. Thanks. Awesome. Thank you, Dow.